Hey folks, welcome back. I want to take a look at the current dynamic between Peter Monn and Rich Lux here on YouTube. It looks like Rich Lux is having a bit of a crash out when it comes to Peter Monn on Twitter, and that may reveal my personal bias. I really like Peter Monn. I hope that I can be as amazing as he is when I grow up to be his age, if that makes any sense. I think that he's a cool person, but that does reveal my bias with this particular situation. So if that's a turnoff for you, I completely understand. But I did want to get Spirit's perspective on their particular dynamic and see what's going on, why Rich Lux is suddenly popping off when it comes to Peter Monn, because these are two people who've known each other for a number of years. And just now it feels like their relationship is coming to a close. And that makes sense. One, this is a 9-year when it comes to numerology. This is the ends of things. It's the wrap-up year. It's time to let some things go, and you might see a lot of people kind of crashing out depending on what kind of karmic debt or divine blessings they've built up over the past decade. 9 years or so, okay? So just keep that in mind. So, I'm going to be using the 7th sphere Lenormand to take a look at this particular dynamic, and I'm going to be putting together a portrait spread. So I'm not shuffled just yet, but I'm going to get started. There are no reversals in Lenormand. I shuffle until Spirit asks me to stop. What's on bottom is Moon. Emotions. Under the dark of night, Rich Lux is hiding something. Nobody's hiding anything, but there are emotions under the surface that neither one completely understand, because this is a karmic connection that Peter Monn needs to finally break. I wonder, Peter Monn is definitely not a pagan, but if he were a pagan, then I would recommend a cord burning, or you know what I'm saying, a cord cutting. There we go. A cord cutting kind of ceremony, because this is something that's taking place under the dark of a spiritual night for Rich Lux. Rich Lux does not understand, spiritually speaking, what's going on within himself. He doesn't want to look within himself. He's unfortunately tends to be a shallow person. He does not want to touch the emotions underneath. So that's going to be the central theme. It's the elephant in the room. It's the things that Rich Lux doesn't want to deal with. He sees things in Peter Monn that he does not want to deal with on an emotional level, and so he's lashing out at the mirror and is doing nothing to fix the person that he sees in the mirror, if that makes any sense at all, okay? The mystery, this is a mysterious moment that Rich Lux does not understand within himself, but one day, if he gets to a certain level of maturity, he could understand this as a turning point moment for him. There may be some kind of shift in his transits that affect his natal birth chart that are making things a challenge for him right now. Pluto in Aquarius may be pulling up some things for him. But also Mercury is currently, I believe it started to transit through Aries. I'll have to get into, in post-production, I'll have to verify that. But this is the time for lash outs to happen, for things to be said that people regret later. This is, astrologically speaking, perfect timing, even if it is low vibrational activity, okay? A lot of heavy energy goes into this. This is about establishment energy. This could be about sexual energy in some context, but not so much about this one. Yes, there is some here. sexual desire for something that he sees within Peter Monn. He sees why Peter Monn is a kind of sexual magnet in his own way, and Rich Lux doesn't understand how to get there. So he wants that. So Rich Lux wants what Peter Monn has, because Rich Lux perceives a sexual kind of magnetism within Peter Monn that Rich Lux wants. Okay, so I'm forming the top row, which is about consciously speaking what's going on. So Rich Lux is aware of these conversations that he's having with, and let me just say right here, this is all allegedly for entertainment purposes only, okay? Rich Lux is having these like internal monologues, quite possibly, but he's definitely not talking about this, okay? So I just pulled out the dog, which lands alongside the Lillian above the moon. This is about chasing cars. And definitely when the Lenormand was created, cars did not even remotely exist. But that's the phrase that came to mind when I started to look at this particular card. He's chasing something that he can't have, because if Rich Lux realizes it, Rich Lux has a sexual magnetism within himself that if he were to recognize it, he wouldn't want Peter Monn's or anyone else's sexual magnetism, because Rich Lux would have his own. He already has his own, he just doesn't recognize it. Rich Lux is his own work of art, even when he doesn't realize it. He is his own worst enemy. We all can be our own worst enemies when it comes to trying to be something that we're not, because we're insecure with who we truly are. It takes spiritual, mental, and emotional maturity to realize who we are, our shadow selves, our flaws included, and incorporate all of that into the recognition that we are the works of art that we are. It takes letting go gradually through meditation of not just the personal ego, but the collective ego as well. That's the true freedom. That's the true revolution that we can all experience. And Rich Lux could, depending on how his astrological transits are operating, he could be given an opportunity right now to transform himself spiritually, and he's kind of quaking on that. He sees something in Peter Monn that he desires deeply, because the sexual magnetism goes to the core of a being. It speaks to confidence. It speaks to someone who has transformed themselves repeatedly and has become a radically different person than where they started where they first started on their spiritual journey. That's going to make a lot of people jealous. Anyway, long conversation to say that I see Rich Lux allegedly chasing after something that he can't have because he wants what Peter Monn has. He doesn't want what he has within himself yet. There's always that possibility, right? I'm pulling from the top. We have here Sun. This could be about success. It's also about, interestingly, the opposite of the moon, which the moon was the central theme for this particular reading. It could be about the light of day exposing something, and that's landing in the future. Consciously, something could be exposed, and he could expose something. He could tell his story. We need to get more information when it comes to this particular sun. But because the sun lands on the house of the ship, this describes to me a spiritual journey that arrives at a certain point, maybe not at the end, but arrives at a certain point that Rich Lux must confront what he isn't, and must also start to appreciate who he is. Okay, this is a personal spiritual journey for Rich Lux. This is rebellion against what he secretly admires in Peter Monn and cannot bring himself to admit that he admires that. Even though consciously he's having those conversations, but he doesn't realize this, if that makes any sense. It's a conversation that he's having in the abstract, but whether he is saying, I'm jealous of Peter Monn, I don't think that he's gotten to that point yet, if that makes any sense. Cross, I'm building the second row, and I'm building the past column. Cross, this is a burden. You know what? Earlier when I was looking at the dog, I got body image issues. He doesn't like how he looks. He resents the genetics that he was born with for making him look a particular way that he doesn't like. It's possible, there's the risk of a possibility that he doesn't like his skin tone. And that might be, again, possibly why in the past, at least when I was watching him years ago, why he would cover up so much of his face with paint and so much, and pretty consistently, okay? Not saying that it wasn't flashy and didn't attract attention, and definitely create a brand name, create a literal face for a brand that he was creating, but it also acted as a kind of literal mask for the insecurities that he feels, that he has felt historically about his body image issues. This is his burden to bear. This is his shadow aspect that he doesn't want to face within himself. He doesn't want to talk about this, but I wonder, because the cross lands on the house of the house, which is about what goes on behind closed doors, I wonder if he doesn't berate himself in mirrors. I wonder if he doesn't look at himself in mirrors and think about how disgusting he looks. Again, this is what goes on beneath the surface. What he doesn't want people to see. This is emotional depth that he hasn't reached yet. And he's, years ago I noticed that, and it bothered me about him because, and here's what I'm saying, he was reacting to a video about Jason Nash describing how he felt when Trisha Paytas crashed her car into Jason Nash's house and held him hostage, basically, when Jason Nash was trying to break up with Trisha Paytas. And at the time, I don't remember what video it was now. It was the last video I watched. I remember that much. It was the last video I watched of Rich Lux. Rich Lux handled it in such a way that it was an unintentionally shallow and callous response, because Jason was clearly having a traumatic response recounting the story. Jason was shrinking back into his seat. He was curling into himself to it was a protective move. He was uncomfortable. He was, to say the least, he was upset while recounting the story. It bothered me watching Jason recount the story, and I didn't feel like Rich Lux handled it in the way that didn't handle with the gravitas that I felt like the story deserved. And then there's more, and I don't want to get into that, but this is stuff that beats on a soul eventually, because Rich Lux has the capacity to feel deeply. This is the central theme, but he avoids it. He skates away, he skips away from it, because he avoids feeling deeply. He says that he doesn't want to feel that way. He wants to feel comfortable and stable, and emotions don't feel comfortable or stable for him. He might have some heavy earth and heavy water energy that might be at odds with each other somewhere in his birth chart or in his current transits. It could be both of them, okay? Here you've got star. This is interesting. I'm looking at heavenly bodies forming a kind of knighting position. I'll put a picture. I've been putting pictures up on the screen, I know that much. But you can see that. You've got sun, star, and moon working together in an interesting pattern. So this is going to expose things that, or he is going to get this, is possibly saying that he's going to get the success that he's always wanted in life, but it could also be about exposing his star power and about exposing who he truly is. That could be something that he struggles with later in the future. This is still an incomplete portrait spread, but him choosing to also expose his emotional journey towards emotional maturity, spiritual maturity, mental maturity, could be a way that he finds great success on the platform, and he drops the Rich Lux. He could temporarily drop the Rich Lux persona and become who he is truly. And then every once in a while he picks up the Rich Lux persona just to have fun every once in a while. But ideally he can head towards a version where he can be authentic and genuine, comfortably stable within himself, no matter what external factors are going on around him. Okay, that's the ideal scenario. He can choose this, but he also has free will. Not only is this allegedly for entertainment purposes only, but he has free will. If he makes a choice in a direction, this is predicting what could happen if he continues to make the same choices that he always has. If he makes a choice towards his best, or best in his highest good, or he goes for the worst version of himself, then things could change. He still has free will. This is just talking about where he could go if he continues on the same trajectory. And earlier I talked about the sun being associated with the house of the ship, and here we have the card, the ship, landing in the past column and forming the third and final row, which is the unconscious row. The middle row is what is the current reality of his current situation. So star power is a heavy burden on him, because right now he's undergoing some really deep, hopefully going through an emotional transformation that he needs to coming to terms about his body image and about his own sexual expression, not about his sexual identity, but also about how his sexual expression works together with his sexual identity and his gender identity. There's a lot going on right there, and that makes sense. That's a very deeply complex dynamic within each human, most especially within the LGBT community, within each LGBT individual, okay? There's a lot going on. But this is a journey that started a long time ago and continues to this day, continues to function. This has ramifications that go well into the future. It's been a long time since I read for Rich Lux, and honestly, if I had been thinking, I would have watched that older video before. Well, okay, Spirit's also indicating that it's irrelevant to this particular reading, so it doesn't matter either way. I might watch it later nonetheless. But we see here that this was a burden that began quite possibly when he was a teenager. When he started to become aware of his sexual identity, of his gender identity, of how his gender and sexual identity worked together, but also how he expressed himself sexually, that's where the issues started to pop up. These were quite possibly, there is some kind of issues with his Chiron, his natal Chiron, that could be indicating some things that he needs to heal. And if he starts to heal, if he reaches out with a genuine heart to heal others' Chiron wounds, there's the potential that he could start to heal his own Chiron wound. But that would need to come from a place of emotional, spiritual, and mental maturity. And as long as he's refusing to deal with these emotional transformations that he has to go through, he's going to continue to stay a shallow, emotionally stagnant person. Of course, it's not a great place to be. And we don't want him to stay there. We want him to recognize that he is an incredible work of art, flaws and shadows, all in between, okay? I hope I'm making sense. That forms the past column. I do see with the past diagonal with the sun, the moon, and the ship that this emotional success, this emotional uprising, his relieving of his burden, because he uses the platform that he's on to talk honestly and authentically about what he's had to go through in order to grow into a mature, powerful individual. This is a journey that started years and years ago, and that will progress years and years into the future. But this is something that is in the making. That quite possibly he's going to publish a book in the future, possibly a well-known ebook even, that could possibly sell well when he talks about how he broke bridges with people like Peter Monn because he didn't want to confront any addictive issues that he might possibly be dealing with right now. And of course, Peter Monn is very open about talking about his his journey through addiction, through rehabilitation, through recovery, through his daily journey through recovery. And right now, this is something that Rich Lux is rebelling against. But later on, he may be very open in a book about why, what was going on. And it might be a very raw and revealing journey. He could possibly choose to use his platform for good and to teach people how to respond to having to go through deep emotional transformation. He may have stuff in his 8th house that he could be avoiding. That is the 8th house of death, of rebirth, of emotional stuff, and also of sex stuff, about sexual taboo stuff. And unfortunately, stereotypically speaking, in a cis heteronormative society, LGBT stuff is going to be unfortunately considered taboo. And I'll speak for myself. When I've spent so much time within the LGBT community that I come out and rejoin the cis heteronormative world, it's kind of like, these people think I'm weird, but it was my daily life, back there in that community, okay, if that makes any sense. And he's not come to terms with how outsiders around the LGBT community perceive him. I feel a weakness and insecurity when it comes to how he emotionally perceives himself, and once again about how he emotionally perceives how he sexually expresses himself, okay? Right now, this is not something that he sees clearly. This is, again, in the unconscious position, building the current situation. Okay? This is the current situation column, if I can get my cards straight. Chasing something that he can't have, barking up the wrong tree even. He needs to be focusing on himself. He needs to be obeying spirit. He needs to be listening to his guides, to his ancestors. If he associates himself with deities, he needs to come into a deep personal relationship with those deities. And even if he's an atheist, badass, he needs to find within himself the deep desire to make the human condition better. You don't have to be in a particular faith at all, or religion at all, in order to make the world a better place. You can be an atheist or an agnostic, but as long as you're choosing to make the world a better place, mission accomplished. Well done. Okay, he's not there yet. He does not see himself clearly at all. He's running away from himself. I'm getting this image of a dog running so hard that he's creating dust clouds. This is a dog chasing its tail that he can't catch. In fact, the dog's tail isn't there. It's one of those little docked tails that looks like a nose whenever you put like glasses on the dog's butt and that kind of thing. And I'm not trying to make fun of the situation. Rich can't have what he's chasing. So he's just, right now he's his own worst enemy. That's where he is right now. As I'm recording this, I'm looking at the date. It is currently April 29th. Let me get my phone. There we go. Can you see that? That's terrible. My camera says 12:31. I'm sorry. 12:31, April 29th. I'm so sorry. My camera is just terrible. But anyway, he's really upset with what he sees in the mirror. Peter Monn is his mirror. These two people are karmically linked. It's like they're like bumping each other spiritually to get better over lifetimes. And this is like the second or the third lifetime that Peter Monn and Rich have been together, bumping up against each other in some particular fashion that spiritually advances one but not the other necessarily. But in the next lifetime, the dynamic might be reversed. It's an interesting... I'm just getting this image of like two rocks just kind of like bumping each other, rolling alongside a path. It's like really, really interesting earth energy I get with those rocks. Last and not least, we've got fish landing in the future column. This is going to become a story that's deeply valuable to him, but it also might do something to shatter his self-image. Once he brings his emotional transformation story out there to the public for them to see what took place under the dark of night, working with his shadow aspect to the people, it's going to reveal the deepest, darkest part of himself, and for some people that's going to send them away, but it's also going to attract a lot of people who recognize the realness within him. It's going to attract forgiveness. And, Rich may not feel like he deserves it in the future, but it's going to be given to him nonetheless. He's rebelling against the mirror that he sees right now, but in the future, there's the real possibility that he could integrate what's going on right now into his story later on and become a really cool role model for a lot of people to look up to, regardless of their gender identity, their sexual orientation, their age. It won't matter. They're going to be able to look up to Rich Lux for who he chose to become in spite of all of this. I'm getting shallow circumstances created, potentially a shallow man, but that he doesn't have to stay there. If he doesn't want, he needs to be able to face the darkness within himself and realize that the shadows are there for a reason, and that when he can incorporate the shadows together with his inner higher self, together with the version of himself that was born in this lifetime, he can become the greatest version of himself that he can possibly be. And he can inspire a lot of other people to become the best versions of themselves too. And then he can become like Peter Monn. So, interesting message. There's a lot going on here with particularly with Rich Lux. I kind of felt like the dynamic was mostly with Rich Lux and mostly not with Peter Monn. But based on this particular reading, Peter Monn has nothing to do with this in actuality. Peter Monn is a mirror. And this has everything to do with Rich Lux. Okay. So, thank you for listening to this point. If you indeed got to this point, I hope you have a great rest of your day. Take care.